Another thing we proposed, and actually did when we were up in doing the CAO and my team up on the Hill, we put the entire congressional budget online. This is the $1 billion that the House, Senate, and Library of Congress and a couple ancillary agencies spent. We put it in with a searchable database. We put it in with explanatory notes that were vetted across the political spectrum. We had Common Cause and Ralph Nader's Congress Watch, all the way over to National Taxpayers Union and a number of other conservative groups. And what we want to do was to explain to the American public how the money is spent, why it's spent, what lags there are, how the money moves, and every single penny of that $1 billion was categorized in a searchable database. It lasted 4 months. Again, I got a visit from John Boehner, who's now the minority leader of the House, and he said, we've had a caucus, and this is just too public. And I said, but this is American tax dollars. This is the way money is spent. People need to know about this. It's too public. So what we were hoping to do was to have the Congress show the rest of the federal government it can be done. Every penny of spending, $1 billion, searchable, out there on the internet. Basically, we were going to update it every month, and so it'd be time for members to review it, and if any corrections had to be made. And then shame the executive branch to say, in a $2 trillion economy, a $2 trillion budget, every penny should be on the internet the same way, searchable. You could say a couple national security issues or DEA drug enforcement programs might need to be hidden for national security purposes. But everything else, every other penny, we deserve to know that. And imagine if all that was out there. If literally today you could leave this room, go onto your internet, and search any government agency right down to the penny, knowing that within a month of this meeting, it was timely. That basically deputizes every American citizen to be their own inspector general. Again, the liberals would be looking at defense with a fine-tooth comb, conservatives would be going after HUD and all the domestic programs, but the key is, imagine the flood of new insights that would go out to the media, to the internet, to the bloggers. Again, citizen oversight is what's going to be needed because we cannot trust our elected officials. Give you an example of the kind of insanities that go on in Washington. I'm a big fan of the Park Service, but think of this. The head of the Park Service, head of Fish and Wildlife Service are political presidential appointees. They both answer to deputy assistant secretaries, one for parks, one for wildlife, also presidential appointees. They then feed to an assistant secretary for parks and wildlife, who then reports to the Secretary of Interior. That's 3 levels of presidential appointees and $5 million a year in salaries, benefits, staff, travel, office, and equipment. And that's probably a low end. Any of us who've run private businesses, if you say, we have a service to deliver, we have a hierarchy that needs to guide that service, you'd flatten that out in a heartbeat. But you go agency by agency, and that kind of layering and bloating is a fact of life. Again, presidential input straight to that agency, straight to the secretary. Get rid of those other levels. $5 million comes back to be used in real ways. The big problem in Washington is there is no glory in good management. People don't celebrate clean audits. People don't celebrate budget reductions and efficiencies. They celebrate expansions. Politicians want to cut ribbons. Politicians want to announce initiatives. It's also easier to add something than it is to change something. So what happens is government grows one press release at a time, and that's how it always happens. And when you look back on 9/11, what was the first 2 things that came out of President Bush's mouth? Form a new agency, Department of Homeland Security, which has been basically tripled the amount of money that was being thrown into security, and it really didn't net the results that we were hoping. I mean, you had bloated bureaucracy, you had layers, and of course that led to FEMA being undermined, et cetera. Transportation Safety Administration. I was on the airways at that time after 9/11 saying the federalization of airport security is just going to lead to a bloated bureaucracy that's totally ineffective. And that's exactly what happened. So the key is that even Republicans see the growing of government one press release at a time benefits them. So how do they cover all this up? It gets back to this issue of polarization, that they know that the louder they scream, the more they can throw insults at the other party, the more they can divert attention from what is really going on. This type of abusive partisanship is undermining the dialogue in Washington. It is also basically feeding the media that likes to have basically the warfare of the Colosseum, like the old Roman days, than trying to have any real enlightening dialogue. One thing we should demand of all of our elected officials, and this is elected officials at every level, commission at the county level, municipal, state, federal, and especially these presidential candidates, have any of them ever voted for a candidate of the other party? Because in my book, if you can't find good across the aisle, you can't govern a whole country. And I want to take issue today with what John Edwards said yesterday. You might have heard his remarks. Obama actually said something decent. He said, Reagan changed the trajectory of this country, and he was a true leader of change. Edwards countered by saying, I would never say anything good about Ronald Reagan. He was not a change agent, he was an agent of destruction. To me, Edwards just basically took himself out of even going for a dog catcher in my book, because of course I knew Reagan and for many, many years, and the key is that he was one of the great leaders of the 20th century and really of American history. And even though I'm a lifelong conservative, I mean, I disagree with almost everything Franklin Roosevelt did, but I have to see that as a leader, he was a good leader during the Depression. The key is that we need to look across the aisle. We need to say that there's somebody out there in the Democratic Party, if you're a Republican, that's doing something right. There's some mayor, some governor, some commission majority in some county who are doing good things, serving the public, creating cost-effective business-based programs that meet public needs in efficient ways. I want to conclude with two brief areas that also relate to this election cycle. We are fundamentally challenged as a viable democracy in the 21st century by two major issues. The first one is external. We're still confronting the outcome of World War I. Think about it. World War I ends and four major empires collapse. The Russian Empire, because the Tsars tumble, Austro-Hungarian Empire, German Empire, Ottoman Empire. World War II was basically the power vacuum relating to Austro-Hungary and Germany. Nazism, fascism rises up. We have to fight a world war to sort out Central and Western Europe. The Tsar falls, communism comes in. We have to fight a lengthy Cold War to deal with Russia and the power vacuum that happened that communism filled, and there's still remnants of that around the world.